welcome to the fourth episode. Yes, the fourth of Let Me Go on a Tangent, which I think I have concretely decided that that's what the name of this is. For this week, I decided that we're gonna start with a TV show, finally. And no, it's not Mr. Robot or Good Omens, because I am a liar. It is the TV show, drumroll please. Sorry if that was hard to listen to. Fionna and Cake. Now, if you don't know what Fionna and Cake is, it is the spin-off show of 10 episodes of Adventure Time, which no one saw coming. It's basically just a gender-bent version of the cast of Adventure Time. Nothing really more to it than that, so we thought. However, in this sort of like spin-off / epilogue kind of thing, we learned that... Okay, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so how this is going to work, I think I'm going to try a different organizational setup. So how this is going to work is that I'm going to go through a brief synopsis of what kicks off the plot, and then I'm just going to go down the list of characters, because this is just 10 episodes a mess. It's a mess. It's an entertaining mess, and I do love it, and I love how the fandom has kind of been revivified or revived by this spin-off and all the like fan content that has spawned because of it. I think everyone is just so creative, and Adventure Time was such a big part of my childhood and obviously a lot of other people's childhood, not only because it went on for so long, like 11 seasons or so, but because it was just so special to me on a thematic level. It just touched upon a lot of stuff that I think as a child you're not thinking about, but as you're growing with the characters, you start to question stuff more. It's just really special to me, and obviously it's a lot of people share the same opinion. So let's just jump into it. Okay, so what kicks off the plot for this little epilogue? Also, I should probably say, spoilers, I guess. This is an Oops All Spoilers podcast, so I don't know why you're doing here if you're not expecting spoilers. But also, I will say, if you want to watch the spin-off, you probably should watch Adventure Time first, or at the very least watch the finale of Adventure Time, because you could probably pick up and fill in the holes with just the finale. But if you really want to be a completionist about it, watch Adventure Time first and then watch the spin-off, because I think you're really going to get a lot more out of it if you watch the entire thing. But, you know, I'm not your mom. I'm not your dad. Who cares? Do what you want. You're an adult. Okay, so what kicks off the plot of Fionna and Cake is Simon, formerly Ice King, is unhappy with how the finale turned out, which I'm just going to reference. I'm not going to explain it to you. He's basically just wants to see his wife again, and he's trying to do an completely illegal ritual to see his wife again, his big ol' chaos god wife, and it just is not going great for him, and he accidentally accesses the pocket dimension in his head that houses Fionna and Cake's universe and brings them into his world, the OG Adventure Time world, which also, another side note, this is a dimension hopping show, which means it has to do with the multiverse, which I feel like side note to the side note, I feel like every single show and movie nowadays feels like they need to add a multiverse into their plot to feel relevant, and it's just like, okay, I mean, it was cool when Marvel did it, I guess, and then it was really cool when Spider-Verse did it, but then it's like everyone's trying to hop on Spider-Verse's back, like ride their coattails, and I'm just like, not everything has to be multiverse, but I'll make an exception here because it's fun, and back to the point. This is a multiverse hopping plot that happens. So the way that I keep track of the worlds, weird way to talk. The way that I'm keeping track of the worlds is that I've labeled them in the order that they travel them to. So for instance, the original world where all of the Adventure Time peeps are, I'll call OG or World 1. The next one, which is Fionna and Cake's world, I'll call World 2 or just Fionna and Cake. The Celestial Realm, where all of the celestial gods that kind of like pull the strings, in a sense. I hesitate to call Prismo a god, but like that's just in the broadest of strokes what they are. That's what I'll call them, just the Celestial Realm. And then World 3, World 4, so on, so forth, etc. You get it. Okay? So, what kicks off the plot is that he's trying to see his wife, the ritual goes bad, and Fionna and Cake is now tangible and in the OG world with Simon. And apparently, two things become apparent. Apparently, Simon is doing an illegal ritual and he's getting in trouble. And Prismo's getting in trouble. Well, Simon is getting in trouble with Prismo, and Prismo's gonna get in trouble with his boss because Fionna and Cake was his fan fiction that he wrote and something that he hid inside of Ice King's head when Simon was still Ice King, and it was completely like not okay for him to do that, so he hid it there. And now that he like cat's out of the bag, pretty much, this antagonist, whatever. The antagonist force of the show is called Scarab, and he wants to expose. He's basically a bail bondsman, and he is a tattletale for people in his workplace in the Celestial Realm that aren't doing their job. So he really wants to get Prismo fired and or demoted. Side note, definitely exes. These two definitely had an affair that got messy. They just gave off those vibes. I don't make the rules. Okay? And so, the basic plot of this is that Simon wants to see his wife. Fionna and Cake want their world to be magical again because once Ice King turned back into regular Simon, their world turned from a magical land of ooh into a coffee shop AU, which is not what they want because Fionna wants some excitement. And like the world should be more magical. That's what she thinks, and she wants it to be magical. So they go on this journey with Simon so that he can put back on the crown to become magical again and quote unquote save their world. They find out that that's not what they want, but I'm getting ahead of myself. And to add to that, they're also getting hunted down by Scarab, who wants to eliminate the anomaly universe because they're technically illegal. Discrimination. But that is the basic gist of the plot without talking about anything about like the ending or the themes or whatever. So that is the first 10 minutes of what I'm talking about. Now I'll get into the meat and potatoes of the story. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to talk about each character. And then through each character, I'm going to talk about the themes and the interesting stuff that happens a little fast because I got stuff to do. I could probably talk about this for 3 hours, but that is not what I'm supposed to do. So that's just how it's going to be. Okay? Okay, so to start us off, we're going to talk about Fionna first. And I love her so much. Even when she had her first appearance in the actual show of Adventure Time, I just loved her so much. Because she just is so me. She's so me. And I'm not afraid to say that. And she's even more me now that she's being depicted in this modern world as an adult who's bad at adulting. And I think I'm not alone in this because, as I said, this show ages with you and grows with you. So the fact that Fionna went from the adventure rough and tumble kid when she was conceptualized, now into this, as she's seen here, an adult who hates every job she's had and doesn't really know what she's doing with her life. Me. That's me. And that's many other people who connect with the show. Okay. And her basic character arc is that she learns that the world that she took for granted isn't so bad after all. And she learns to love fully and embrace what she has. Even though it's not perfect, she can make change that matters. And she does end up saving her reality and making it a legitimate alternate universe. And she does end up making it just a little bit more magical. Because her cat talks now. But also just in the very metaphorical way. It's like, that speaks to the kind of mentality I think a lot of young adults have. Where we don't see the purpose in not living, but engaging with the world as it is, because we might feel like it's a hopeless venture. Because the world is so bad. Excuse my French, it's so fucked up right now. But that's not all the world is, and I think that's what we need to remember. That's what we need to keep coming back to, because that's what makes it worth it. And I think that's what Fionna realizes, is that, yeah, I'm not punching vampires in the face or saving princes on the daily, but there is stuff about my life that makes it worth living even despite that. And that also is a journey that mirrors Simon's journey, which I will talk about in a second. But that's Fionna, and I love her. And one scene in particular I will bring up for her is the scene that happens in Bima World, which is World 6, the 6th world that they visit, that has screen time. Anyway. And she does a lie, and she tells a lie, and she does a bad, and she feels really bad about it. And the voice actor did such a great job. She ends up crying and just in need of a pep talk. And it is just so heartbreaking because it sounds so realistic, and she sounds so kid-like. And it's just, it's heartbreaking, and it's such a good scene. And the voice actor did amazing. So on to the next one. I'm going to talk about the alternate Fionnas, which is Finn. I would talk about Finn first because technically he was the OG, but Fionna is on the title card, so I talked about her first. So next I want to talk about Finn. Finn's part will be a little short. So Finn's whole screen time in this show is trying and failing to be a source of emotional support for Simon in this really tough time in his life. Finn at this point is at least 30 or so years old. Jake is dead. Guys, Jake is dead, and I'm devastated about it. And so is Finn. Finn's devastated, and he's doing this thing that is very true to his character, where he is just fully repressing all of those feelings and grief, and it's just very obvious that's what he's doing. And he projects those feelings and repressions onto Simon, so instead of actually being there for him, he leads him on this adventure where he tries to keep him and Simon busy because that's what quote-unquote is working for him. But it's not working, and it really doesn't help Simon at all. It's not helping Finn either, but it's like, what are you gonna do? It's so sad. It really just... In the finale for Adventure Time, we get to see the death of Finn, which is heart-wrenching and horrible because he's my son. But we basically get to see him meet Jake again in the astral plane, and they reincarnate, and it's super sweet. But he said before that, like, once Jake is dead, he's kind of just waiting to die so he can meet Jake again. And that, if that is not If that didn't just break your heart, you're a liar. You're a liar, and I don't want you here, okay? Jeez. But yeah. He's also super cool looking. Like, he's a beefy adventurer, and he can kill a giant bear with his bare hands. My son's all grown up, and I'm so proud of him. But yeah, that's all for Finn. It was great to see him again, but he is really just in one episode, so that's him. The next one, the next offshoot of Fionna, I gotta talk about Farm World Finn. Farm World Finn is so much. Again, if you haven't watched the show, you won't know what I'm talking about. But his character is also just so heartbreaking because he has, first of all, 5 kids. And I think it's implied that he had them with Huntress Wizard. He either had them with Huntress Wizard or just adopted them. I feel like it's more in character for him to just adopt strayed kids. He just seems like the type. And he has this real gruff way about him, and it makes me really sad. And Jake is still there. I'm going to just talk about Jake, Farm World Jake here. It feels right to pair the Jakes with the Finns. I'll talk about Cake and her own thing. But Farm World Jake is so old. He's on his last legs, and it makes me think about my own dog, and I'm sad now. Hold on, this is sad. I'm still sad, but I'm back. Okay, so it just is a lot to see him like that, and just the juxtaposition of what we know to be such a boisterous young lad and the man that he's had to grow up into is just so much. It's so much. Because he clearly had a lot of growing up to do. And we don't know if he did it alone, and he's living in this like wasteland where there's no magic because there's gang violence. There's a lot going on, and he maybe dies at the end of the episode. I don't think he does. Personally, I subscribe to the theory that his son and his girlfriend, Destiny, moved to Fionna and Cake's universe with the permission of Farm World Finn. Because if he didn't and he's dead, that means that the eldest of Finn's kids left the other 4 children alone, literally abandoned his siblings. And I wholeheartedly disagree with the notion that any child raised by Finn would ever be able to do that. So, no, I don't think Farm World Finn is dead. And I'll die on that hill. You can fight me about that. I don't think he's dead. I don't think it's in character for Finn or for any of his children to ever do something like that. So I don't think it's possible. And if it is possible, at least he would be more conflicted about it. They made a joke about inside plumbing when they decide to live there, and I don't think it's true. But on to Cake, because we gotta talk about Cake, because then we gotta talk about. I guess I'll save Simon for last because there's so much Simon. But we'll have a little bit of Cake, and then we'll have a little bit of the gays, and then we'll talk about Simon. Okay? Cool. So what did I just say? Okay, Cake. Cake is such a simple creature. She's a cat to Jake's dog, and she's somehow so charismatic as a person while simultaneously embodying everything that makes a cat a cat. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you've never interacted with a cat before. She's a real shit talker. She loves to mess with other people. She's very loving only to Fionna, and she loves to stir the pot. And I didn't think they would strike the right balance because she does start out sort of in the show as a regular cat. But then once they get into the magic world, She gets a magic translator and she can talk in words now, and that's certainly a change because that I'm not sure what the implication there is of like all animals are sentient and they just can't communicate in our language, or if the world gave her sentience. Either option, terrifying. But I can shelf my disbelief and look at it through the eyes of a kid and be like, actually, I can't because this epilogue spin-off thing is made for adults. It was on Adult Swim. Because all of the people who watched Adventure Time are adults now, so that makes sense. They can swear and drink now. It's great. It's big for them. I think Finn should be allowed to say fuck. And Simon. They've been through so much. They deserve it. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah, Cake. There's not much to talk about Cake. She's a cat. Love her. Fiona loves her. She's a good companion. Except for when she's being an ass. But, no one's perfect, so I find it reasonable. And they make up relatively quick. And it was an understandable conflict, and I get it. So what I'm saying is let's move on to the gays. Okay, so once more, if you weren't there when Princess Bubblegum kissed Marceline the Vampire Queen, you won't understand how big of a cultural reset it was. It was so big for us because there was always that tension of like, there are some vibes here. They're not going to say that they're exes, but they're definitely exes. And then we were right. 100%. And then they got back together, which is so rad for them. Love that for them. And we don't even see them except for like one scene where Simon calls Marcy. And they're like getting tattoos. They're 100% drunk, by the way. But, good for them. They're retired. They can have fun if they want to. But the more interesting aspect of this is their gender-bent counterparts in Fiona's world, where they're named Marshall Lee instead of Marceline, and Gary Prince instead of Bonnabelle Bubblegum, I guess is her maiden name, instead of Princess Bubblegum. And they're humans, obviously, because it's a normal world. But all throughout the show, we kind of have this back and forth A and B of them falling in love while all of this magic, multidimensional shenaniganery is happening. And it's just so sweet. And it's so fulfilling. It's so fulfilling to the people. I won't say fulfilling. Vindicating to the people who are like, if the girls are gay, then the dudes are also gay. Because they're the same person. And some people tried to be like, no, they're different. And 10 years later, who's laughing now? Yeah, that's right. Me. I was right. But that's besides the point. It's a very sweet romance that is implied to take place like, I imagine it couldn't be longer than a week, but they seem to grow very close in the span of a week. They also seem to not spend much time apart in that week, and there is some debating across the fandom if that is because it's being altered through Simon's psyche, because he's thinking about how his daughter is romantically involved with the princess in his world. So if that might be altering the canon of events that's happening in Fiona's world, which is in his head. Honestly, I feel like that's looking too much into it. You're overthinking it. It's just, it always would have happened if they ever met. Like, they were going to meet regardless. I just feel like this would have always happened. They're soulmates for real, for real. They would find each other and love each other in every universe for real, for real. Oh yeah, they're that kind of pair. They're that kind of ship. And I love it. I go crazy for that. I go crazy for like, in every universe, I would find you and I would love you. Sign me up. Sign me up. In the one scene in particular I will bring up with them is the scene that is mirrored by the Apocalypse world, which is the also, I think, the most visually interesting episode by far. Because what happens in the Apocalypse world is that Simon dies before he can raise Marcy to be a loving person. So Marcy is instead found by the Vampire King and raised to be a ruthless, merciless killer in part of his vampire army. And the whole world dies, basically, because all of these vampires don't have a vampire hunter to hunt them, because that was supposed to be Marcy, but since she doesn't have a moral compass, she's actually leading the charge. So in this universe, her and Bubblegum kind of have this, like, this toxic romance happening, because there's nothing more suggestive than a sword fight. Nope. Rewind. That's not what I meant. What I meant was that there's nothing more suggestively romantic than having hand-to-hand combat with someone who is very obviously your ex. Or something along that vein. So much of my vernacular is very, like, directed towards the queer community. So if you're not part of it, the girls that get it, and the girls that don't. I'm sorry to tell you. But yeah, that whole situation is mirrored with what's happening in Fiona's world, where Gary and Marshall are having their own little romance. And the scene in particular that I wanted to point out was that when Marshall's mom basically humiliates him, debases him in front of, like, her entire social circle of, like, rich wads, Gary is the one who stands up for him and says, "You're a bad mom," to her face. And mind you, he's giving up immense opportunities for his career as a baker in this room full of possible inventors. And Marshall, like, is like, "Dude, don't do this. You're gonna be cut off from, like, all of the opportunities from in this room." And in this room is basically all of the entrepreneurs who could give him money in the city. And Gary says, "Screw that. You're worth more than anything that any of these people could do for me." Mind you, he has known him for a maximum of a week. I had to yell and I had to take the mic away from me because they're U-Haul lesbians, but the opposite. Gender is a spectrum and it's also a soup, and so is sexuality. So if you're gonna try and tell me that they're men, they can't be lesbians, shut up. I know more than you. Okay? You haven't been entrenched in the community and its history as well as I have. I promise you, I know more than you about it. And I'm not actually saying they're lesbians. I'm just saying they're mirroring the lesbians and they're doing it really good. And then the end of the scene is them in the elevator kissing, and as the elevator doors close, it's implied that the sound of the doors closing is meant to symbolize, in the other world, Princess Bubblegum and Marceline hitting the ground as they kill each other. So they're both dead in that world. But it was fun while it lasted. So that's all I have to say about that. Except for, now we can move on to the real star of the show, who just makes your heart break 15 times over. Now we get to talk about Simon. Good Lord, Simon. please get a therapist. You are on the edge, and I'm afraid to say it, borderline suicidal. It's implied. I think that is safe to say. And this is also an adult show. So I'm just going to say it like it is. I think he's borderline suicidal. And I think that if it were not for Fionna and Cake, he would have fully just submitted to whatever happened if he did complete his ritual to see Betty, Goal Betty, in the Chaos Realm. Which is a whole can of beans. There's so much. There's so much. But whatever. Let's talk about Simon and his heartbreaking journey in his PTSD ridden life after being Ice King. Oh my god, there's so much. So he's basically in a place in his life where he's focusing on the past, and he can't see a way forward, and he's obsessed with meeting his wife again. And he can't get himself out of this hole he's dug for himself, where he's like almost re-traumatizing himself because he can only think about the past and only focus on bad stuff that happened to him instead of focusing on the relationships he has on the present and enriching his life as it is now. He just cannot accept that this is how it worked out for him. And I feel really bad for him. You really feel for the guy, because on some level you want to be like, what if there was a way to fix all this? But the whole overarching theme, one of them anyway, of Adventure Time is that shit happens. But you can't linger on it. You have to process them in a way that lets you move on, because nothing stays forever. For Simon, the life that he lived as a professor, where he had a fiance and a life to live, is gone. That world is dead, and there's nothing he can do about it. There is no fixing the past, and there is no changing it. But he can't accept that. Put on the mic. I cleaned it. So in his trying to grip onto the past, he's trying to do this ritual to see Goal Betty again. And he's just a sopping wet cat in a sopping wet cat of a man. It's awful. Talk to your daughter. But yeah, he goes through this journey with Fionna and Cake, and it kind of gives him a reason for living. And through helping them, he helps himself. And with the final leg of the journey, where he actually meets Goal Betty again and talks through what happened and finds a way to move forward, kind of through breaking up with her, essentially, and going back to his original world with the OG World 1, and realizing some things about his relationship with Betty that could have been better. And I have some feelings about how they handled the relationship of Simon and Betty, because it's the same problems, not problems. It's the same thoughts I have with relationships that are inherently tragedies. That doesn't make them bad per se. I just have a lot of feelings about them, which I think is appropriate. The main takeaway of their relationship is that they loved each other to the point of codependency. Betty wanted Simon to be happy and made his happiness her happiness. Simon didn't ask her to do that. And it's not like he wanted her to give up her dreams. It's just that he thought that they were pursuing the same goal, and that his way was the right way. And Betty was always so willing to go with him on his path that she didn't really get to explore anything about herself. And in her descent into madness and sadness, in trying to fix Ice King to become Simon, it was a whole thing. And then ultimately becoming merged with the Chaos God, Golb. That was just the final form of her choosing to sacrifice for Simon. It's really just, it's the culmination of meant to be together but never meant to be, because they loved each other so wholly with their whole being. No one could say that they did not love each other, but they loved each other to the point of obsession, and they non-reflectiveness. They didn't choose to examine the ways they communicated with each other, and that ultimately led to their downfall. That and random circumstance and poor things that happen that no one could control, and it's sad. And man, the whole thing. But Simon ends his journey by basically breaking up with Betty, and Betty goes off to do what Chaos Gods do and enter her next part of her journey. Who knows what she's gonna do, but I'm sure she'll kill it. And Simon comes back to his life ready to engage and ready to be a participant in his own life. And I think that is good for him. I don't think that they could have made it work where Betty would have been normal again and made it in a way that didn't feel cheap, because that would be moving backward. And Adventure Time, as I said, is all about moving forward. The past is an illusion. The future doesn't exist. But the present is now. The only thing that exists is the now. And so we can't focus on either of those things. And that's what Simon figures out, is that he can't keep being a ghost in his own life. Oh my god, there's so much. Okay. Now we've jumped over the hurdle. I want to talk about something more fun. Sort of. The Winter King, which is a shoot off of Simon, basically is a version of the Ice King that managed to project the madness of the crown onto someone else, so he regained all his faculties and his intelligence. I mean, he projected it onto another person, and he, like, subjected another person to the madness that he was owed, which is a wad move, and everyone is aware of it. And he dies because of his crimes, which is fair, but, you know, sad. Because he was so fun. But also, he kind of sucked. It was an interesting to see Simon so resolutely hate another version of himself, because I think you can tell a lot from a person to how they treat mirrors of themselves, and that can be hard to see in real life, because obviously clones don't exist on that level yet. And you can't hop to a alternate parallel dimension to see a version of yourself. But when a person, I liken it to parents and children. When a mom sees herself in her daughter, it can lead to hostility and conflict, especially when they're not willing to recognize their own dissonance in themselves with that. And the same goes for if a father sees himself in his son. If parents in general see themselves and see like unsavory traits that they have in their children, it can lead to conflict, especially when they don't reflect on that and they don't work to break their own cycle, because it's very likely that their own parents saw traits in them that they didn't like, and in turn created hostility within them and probably ruined that relationship. So if you're not willing to try and examine your own relationship with your parents, you're very likely to repeat it. Same concept with Simon and Finn, because Finn has met alternate versions of himself before, and he has always treated them with the utmost kindness and compassion, even when they don't deserve it. Because his perspective is, that's me. I can't be unkind to me, because what did that say about me? And it's just, it was such an outpouring of self-love that was so sweet, and not something that you really see, I don't think. And I think that is also paralleled. What's the word I'm looking for? Whatever the opposite of parallel is, foil. It's a good foil to how Simon treats his counterparts, because he very obviously hates himself. And so each alternate him that he meets, he does not like. I think they only meet the one, actually. Yeah, I think they only meet the one. So, because Apocalypse World, he's dead. And in Farm World, it was Finn. I mean, they didn't get along, but he would have fathered that boy given the chance. Yeah, so it's just the one. But he did really hate him. And he was vindicated because he sucked. The one other thing I want to talk about with Ice Winter King is that he made an Ice Marceline, which begs the question, what happened to real Marceline, because she's shown as a little child. My theory is that just he accidentally killed her, or just couldn't protect her as a child, and it just sent him down the rabbit hole that much faster, and he hit his breaking point and lost his moral compass for doing stuff. So that could spiral into why he felt the need to project his madness onto someone else and then create a false Marceline. I don't know. There's also the theory that Marceline fell in love with the Princess Bubblegum of that universe, and he projected the madness onto her, Princess Bubblegum, become the Candy Queen. Another can of worms, but then Marceline confronted him, and then he ended up killing her. That one doesn't make as much sense to me, because why would he project onto someone that he knew his daughter was in love with? I mean, there's justifications for that, and I could see it playing out in some sense. It just, on a surface level, doesn't make sense to me, but I'm sure if that's what they intended, I could see it. I don't know. It's just sad. It made me sad. It made all of us sad when we saw it, I think, is the main thing, because he's alone. Winter King is alone. He's smart, and he has what Simon wanted, which was his personhood, but he sucks, and he's alone. There's literally no one else in his kingdom but people he made out of ice. He is alone. Also, when Simon asks about Betty, Winter King's Betty, he pretends to not remember her, and it's like the thing is like, oh, who? Oh yeah, Betty. It's like, you dummy. That's the ex you don't want to admit you can't get over. You know? I want more of the story of that relationship, because seems like a lot happened. And I want to know what it was. But I never will, unless the creator or the writer steps up and is like, this is what we had in mind. It's not the same. I do still want to know, though. So. And then what else? What did we not cover? There's one character that's voiced by the dad in Bluey. He's a cosmic being. and he's a giant orb, and he's wearing sunglasses, and he's voiced by the dad in Bluey. I need you to know that because it was in my notes. It was important. What else? I feel like the rest of my feelings about it is mostly in Simon and Betty's relationship, and I feel like that could be summarized in me showing you my TikTok likes and the edits that people have made of them, specifically to Mitski. And oh my god, it's so heartbreaking. It's so good. A tragic romance meant to be together but never meant to be. The past is an illusion, the future is fake. Oh my god. I feel like I just ran a marathon. That was so much. I want to talk more about Betty because I love her so much. She was a chaos god even before she became merged with a chaos god. She was ride or die from the beginning for Simon. And it was. She's so good. She's so good. Because even when Simon is ready to lay down and die without the crown, she's like, shut up. Don't be a wimp, okay? I can save you. Don't you believe in me? I'm gonna save you. Watch me do it. And eventually she does, but at the cost of her own life. And that obsessive love is love nonetheless. And maybe there's a world where they had it all, communicated a little better, and had their way. But the thing with that, oh my god, that goes into. I almost forgot. The thing with that, if they had gotten their happy ending, it would have meant the destruction of the rest of the world, and that is not hyperbole. Because the entire reason that the world was able to live on after the apocalyptic mushroom war event, it was because Marcy was a vampire hunter and saved the human race, basically. If Simon had not served as a moral compass, the entire world would have died, as seen in World 5, the Apocalypse World. Also kind of seen in Farm World, World 4. Because Simon died, but not before he could impart a moral compass onto Marcy. And he stopped. That was actually an instance of stopping the mushroom event entirely. But then there was a thing with the Lich. The Lich! I forgot. Okay, so to end us off, I want to talk about the Lich because he iconic levels of villain, I fear. He is the scariest and most iconic villain in cartoon history. Period. I don't care what you say. Period. He was so scary the first. It was so unlike anything else you had seen up until that point in Adventure Time, and he continues to be unlike anything else. Every time he comes up in story, it's a pin drop, and every time he speaks, everyone listens. It's insane. And that also could be credited to his voice actor, which is, I can't remember. Hold on. Ron Perlman? Ron Perlman? That doesn't speak. Well, Ron Perlman played him in the Fionna and Cake, but I feel like he had a different voice actor. No, it was Ron Perlman. Okay, well. Whatever. His voice is iconic as well. So, and he lives in the BMO world where apparently he's BMO's only friend. That is alive anyway. BMO went a little crazy because he outlived all of his friends. But It was basically a world in which the Lich had succeeded in his quest as the last scholar of Golb to rain destruction and death upon the world. And he killed everyone. He succeeded in his goal. But at what cost? It's that question of, if you strive for the top, what happens when you get there? You work for something for so long and you sacrifice so much. What do you do when it happens? We all talk about, like, oh, if you fail, just try up and get again. We always talk about what happens when something doesn't succeed. What about when it does? There's this whole, like, ego death that he goes through that is just irreparable because he can't. There's nothing else to do. Like, he succeeds and his god does not answer him. He succeeds in his havoc pilgrimage and God is silent. This used to be a kid's show. For the record. And it is kind of funny that Golbetty just one-shot kills him, turns him into geometry, boop, turns him to a puzzle piece. But before he goes out, he has like a killer mini monologue where he kneels at the foot of Golb and asks his god, pleads and demands him to answer him. Tell me what it was all for. What do you want from me? I did everything right. And what is God's answer? God's answer is to smite him where he stands, because he is no longer important. And I don't have the time to examine that right now, but the Lich is just in a class of his own. Nothing could ever top him. And if it does, I will rave about that one. I am so eager always to be proven wrong when it comes to stuff like this. I love to get proven wrong when things could get better, and I didn't think they could. Love that. But that is all for today. I covered everything I wanted to. Go watch the spinoff, and while you're at it, go watch Adventure Time, and while you're at it, go watch the Stakes miniseries, because I forgot that existed, but it is an essential part of the story, where it goes into like Marceline and the Mushroom War and all that stuff, and it's real good fun. I didn't talk about Prismo. I guess I will say this also. Prismo, Jake is dead and Prismo was best friends with Jake, and it's sad because he's in his depression era. He's in his girl dinner depression era. It's real sad, and there are beer cans in his hot tub. Thank you for listening. That'll be all for today. And thank you for letting me go on a tangent. Pacific Tiger Broadcasting. Bye-bye.